Well, hello there. It's time for Sunday school. So I have a story for you today about Queen Esther. It is, in some ways, a very strange story. And when you get bigger, there's details that you'll learn later that make it an even stranger story. But for today, this is sort of the basic package. So a long time ago, in a country called Persia, God's people Israel, they'd lost a war and many of them had been taken to Persia, and many of them had made new lives there and started new businesses and gotten married and had children, and there was a little girl named Esther. Now, something happened, and she lost both of her parents. She had an older cousin, though, named Mordecai, who took her in and fed her and adopted her and took care of her. And Esther grew into a wonderful person. She was smart, and she was funny, and she could do conversations with anybody, and she was graceful, and she was also very, 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 very pretty. And so it came to pass that the king didn't have a queen. This would be the king of Persia. And he wanted a queen. He'd had a queen. There's a long story there. You don't need to bother yourself about it today. But he needed a new queen. And so they had sort of the world's weirdest beauty pageant, where beautiful young women, accomplished young women from all over Persia were brought in, and there was a contest to see who would be the next queen of Persia. And Mordecai thought that Esther should enter the contest. But don't tell anybody that we're related, and don't tell anybody that you're a Jew. It might make a difference. So just be Esther and just see how you do. Esther won the contest. The king fell in love with Esther. He married Esther. Esther became the queen of Persia. Now, because of the rules in those days, and because she was pretending that she and Mordecai weren't connected, they stayed separate. And every day, Mordecai, whose job was guarding one of the royal gates, he'd walk past Esther's windows, and he'd wave, and she'd wave, and they'd send notes to each other sometimes, but they pretty much lived apart. So, that's the beginning of the story. Now, it happened one day that Mordecai learned that there was going to be an assassination on the king, an assassination attempt, that there were people who wanted to kill the king. And he told Esther about it right away. Sent a note to Esther, and Esther sent a note to the king right away, and the king sent a note to the guards right away, and the guards went and arrested these two guys. There was a whole investigation. It was true that these guys meant harm to the king, and the king had them arrested, and he dealt with them like that. So again, some parts of this story are for big kids, but that's what happened. Now, you might be asking yourself, did Mordecai get a reward? Nope. Did anybody say, well done, Mordecai? Nope. Did he get any credit at all? Nope. Nothing. So things went back to normal. The king was the king, Esther was the queen, Mordecai stayed guard at the gate, and time went on. Now, there was another guy. His name was Haman. He was one of the princes of Persia. He was a very important guy, and he was good at his job, and the king liked him, and so he got more and more and more important. He got more and more and more responsibilities until finally he was pretty much running the show. I mean, the king was the king, but Haman was the boss of almost everyone else, and there was a rule that everyone had to bow to Haman. Now, Haman was coming in through the castle gates one day, and all the servants bowed to Haman, except Mordecai. Mordecai didn't. Right? And the other servants said to him, "Psst, you're supposed to bow to that guy." And Mordecai said, "Nope, you're supposed to. You're going to get us in trouble." And Mordecai said, "Nope, I'm a Jew. I only bow down to God." Now, the other servants, I don't know if they were trying to get Mordecai in trouble or if they were trying to get favor with Haman. I don't know what they were thinking. But a couple of them told Haman what was going on, that Mordecai wasn't bowing down to him. And the next time Haman went through the gates, he looked and he saw that Mordecai wasn't bowing down. And it made him so mad, crazy mad. I'm an important man and he won't bow to me. I'm mad. And you know how when you're mad, sometimes you say stupid things or you do dumb things? Haman too. He was so mad, he went to the king and he said, "King, there's people in this country who don't obey our laws. They don't do what we tell them to do. They have their own religion, their own customs. They're not like us. They're not good Persians. Tell you what, I'll even pay for it, but let's have a day when anyone who wants to kill these dirty, horrible people can do it." And the king said, "Whoa, are you sure?" And Haman said, "Yep." And the king said, "Whoa, I trust you." And Haman said, "Good." And the king said, "I guess it's okay." And Haman wrote a letter saying that if anyone wanted to kill a Jew, they could do it on this day that was coming up in the future. Just go ahead and kill him. Can you imagine that? Can you believe that craziness? Well, anyway, that was the new law, and it went out to the whole kingdom. And through the whole kingdom, Jewish people heard about that new law. They read that new law, and they thought, "Oh, what? This is crazy." They thought it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke. And when they figured out it was serious, they were terrified. There's going to be a hunting season on us? That ain't right. And they tore their clothes and they put ashes on their heads and they fasted. That means they stopped eating, and they went through the streets wailing and crying, and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed. Mordecai too. Esther'd be looking out her window and she didn't see Mordecai. There was no note from Mordecai. She didn't know what was going on. She sent some of her servants out. He wasn't at this job. He wasn't anywhere. They went out into town looking for him, and they found him out in the middle of the street with ashes on his head and torn clothes, crying up and down the street, asking for God's mercy. They didn't know what was going on. They asked him. He said, "All Jews are going to be killed." They went back and they told Esther, right? She said to Mordecai, "Here, put some clothes on." Mordecai sent back another man. "I'm not putting any clothes on, and you shouldn't think that just because you're the queen, you're safe. This is all Jews." Well, Esther got scared. Mordecai sent another message to her, and he said, "Listen, you got to fix this. You got to talk to the king. You got to make this happen." Now, there was a rule where the queen wasn't allowed to just go talk to the king anytime he wanted, right? The queen had to wait till the king said, "Come to me." Otherwise, she could be killed. Esther didn't just want to go to the king and take that kind of risk. I mean, if the king welcomed her, that's one thing. But if the king wasn't in the mood to have company, well, then she'd be in real big trouble. And so she sent back a message to Mordecai: "Tell all the Jews in the city to fast, stop eating, and pray for me for 3 days, and then I'll do it." So that's what happened. That Esther goes in, after 3 days, Esther went into the king. And the king looked up and he saw his beautiful queen. He knew he hadn't sent for her, but he had butterflies in his tummy and he was very excited to see her. And he said, "Yes, my queen, what do you want? I'll give you anything you want, up to half my kingdom." And Esther knelt in front of the royal throne and she said to him, "King, I'm having a dinner party. I would love it if you could come. Oh, and bring that Haman." And the king said, "Well, of course. When is it?" Esther said, "It's tomorrow night." And the king said, "Of course, I will do it." So Esther left. The king called Haman, said to him, "Haman, guess what? We're going to a party tomorrow night with the queen. It's just you and me and no one else is invited." Haman felt so incredibly important. Oh, he was full of himself. Oh, he was puffed up. It was very, very, very special to him that he got to go to a dinner party with only the king and only the queen. So he is leaving the castle to go home and tell his wife and tell his family how important he is, how cool this is. And as he's going through the gate, who does he see? Mordecai. Does Mordecai bow to him? No. And he is filled with rage. He is angrier than he has ever been. He's even angrier than he was before when he decided to try to get all of God's people killed. He's crazy angry. And he goes home and he tells his family, "I've been invited to dinner with the queen and the king, and I'm so angry that I just don't even want to go because of that Mordecai fellow." And his wife said to him, "Aren't you in charge? Aren't you the boss? Build a big gallows, and tomorrow ask the king if you can hang Mordecai." The king will say, "Sure." The king doesn't care about a guard here or there. The king loves you. You're having dinner with the king and the queen. And Mordecai says, "That's a really good idea." And he gives the order that these gallows would be built, a place for Mordecai to be killed. And he goes to bed, and he sleeps happy sleep and dreams happy dreams. Can you imagine how broken his soul is? It's hard to imagine. At any rate, the king goes to bed that night too, and the king can't sleep. And the king asks for the royal history to be read to him. All the laws and all the decrees, and I think he thought maybe it'd be so boring that it would just put him to sleep. But one of the things that's read to the king is about how Mordecai had saved the king's life all those years ago by finding out that people meant him harm. And the king says, wait. What did we ever do to honor Mordecai? And the people reading the history look and they flip pages and they say, whoa, it doesn't look like we ever did anything. And the king says, well, that's crazy tunes. We got to take care of Mordecai. He did me a solid service. Right? By this time, it's very early morning, and Haman is there bright and early because he wants to ask the king's permission to kill Mordecai. Right? Haman comes into the room whistling a happy tune. The king sits up in bed and says to him, hey, what should we do for someone that the king wishes to honor? And Haman thinks, it's probably me. After all, I'm having dinner with the king and the queen tonight. The king wants to do me other honor. And Haman thinks to himself, what would be the best thing that could ever happen to me? And then he tells the king, if you really wanted to honor someone, dress them in your royal robes. Let them wear your crown. Put them on your horse. And have one of the princes of the kingdom lead the horse around the town yelling, this is what happens to someone that the king wants to honor. And the king said, that sounds like a great idea. Dress them in my robes, put a crown on their head, put them on my horse, and have one of the princes lead them through the town. Haman says, yep, that would do it. The king says, awesome, do that for Mordecai, do it right now. Can you imagine Haman's thoughts? He didn't want to honor Mordecai, he wanted to kill Mordecai. And he had to dress Mordecai up in the royal robes and put the king's crown on Mordecai's head and put Mordecai on the king's horse and drag him through the whole town, leading the horse, yelling, this is what happens to someone that the king wishes to honor. He had to do it. He didn't dare disobey the king. But it was the worst day of Haman's life. It was awful. He was humiliated. He was horrified. This was his enemy that he was leading through the town praising. And when it was done, he ran home and he hid in his bed and put the pillow over his head. And he wouldn't talk to anyone. He was so ashamed, so horrified. He was so ashamed and so horrified, he forgot about the dinner party. The king had to send a messenger. Hey, have you forgotten what time it is? Let's go, the queen's waiting on us. Haman quickly got up and he got dressed and he fixed his face and he fixed his hair and he ran to the palace and he went in and he finally got himself into the queen's rooms with the king, and they sat at the table, and the queen served them, and he was so upset he couldn't really enjoy it, but you know, the queen doesn't serve just anybody. And partway through the meal, the king said to the queen, now listen, Queen Esther, my beautiful queen, what can I do for you? What do you want from me? And Esther looked the king right in the face, and she said, well, it's like this, king. Someone is trying to kill me. The king went, oh! Haman went, oh! Esther said, not just me, that someone is trying to kill all of my family, all of my friends, all of my people. The king said, oh! Haman said, ooh. Haman didn't know that Queen Esther was a Jew like Mordecai. The king said to Queen Esther, who's trying to kill you? Who's trying to kill all your people? And Esther said, well, Haman, right there, him, that guy, right there, Haman, trying to kill me, trying to kill your queen, trying to kill all my people. You thought Haman was having a bad day before? It just got worse. The king went into a towering rage. He was as mad could be. You want to see a king mad? Talk about killing the queen. That'll get it done. The king was so mad that he didn't trust himself to speak, and he went out onto the porch to cool down just for a second. And while he was gone, Haman figured out that his life was in real jeopardy. He had put out this order, ordering that all Jews could be killed, not knowing that the queen was one of them. And he is in real trouble now. And he reached over and he was trying to ask the queen for forgiveness and to beg for his life for the queen. And maybe he stumbled, or maybe he wasn't paying attention, but he wrapped his arms around the queen's legs just as the king came back in from the porch. And there's Haman hugging on the queen. The king was not amused. He was not happy. And remember that thing that Haman had built for Mordecai's death? Well, that's where Haman's life ended. And the job that Haman used to do, Mordecai got that new job. And he was honored in all of Persia. And the law that anyone who wanted to kill a Jew could, well, a new law was passed where the Jews were allowed to defend themselves. And so nobody tried to attack them. And they went back to living in peace. With Queen Esther being brave, being smart, being articulate, that means able to talk and ask for what she wants, right? She saved her people. It's a strange thing, you know, that this little girl who started life very hard grows up to be a hero. And maybe you'll grow up to be a hero. Or maybe you'll grow up to be a person who just lives in peace with their neighbors and enjoys all the blessings that God has for you. Maybe you'll be called to fast and to pray for God's will to be done. And maybe, just maybe, you and I will live together in God's grace. We will live someday together in God's kingdom. So now you know at least the outlines of this strange and wonderful story about how Queen Esther saved her people. I hope to get pictures back from you. I hope to get projects back from you showing some part of this. But whether you send them or not, know that I love you and I miss you. And more than that, Jesus loves you and He is always with you. You have a good day and know that God is with you always. Bye-bye now.